Wonderful to see everybody. Come on in. The California Climate and Energy Collaborative team is really happy to welcome you back. This is our 30th meeting. I don't know why we always count it, but it just feels nice to wrap them up. I hope everyone had a really lovely Mother's Day. We have a really great learn in store for you today, and it's going to be featuring a couple of friends from DOE and NREL as well. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to welcome everybody to introduce themselves over chat in whatever way that you're comfortable with. I'll start. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the SEEK Statewide Best Practices Coordinator, joined today by John Vandevort with the SEEK team, as well as Kelsey. And I'll invite them to say hi over chat. If you need some help with anything during today's learn, go ahead and reach out to them directly. As always, we're going to run through opportunity roundtables today, and get ready to share anything you might be aware of that's happening out there as well that your Learn network can potentially benefit from. And then we're going to go ahead and bring in our featured presentation from DOE. Afterwards, I want to tell you a little bit more about SEEK Forum and the SLEEK meeting that's going to happen there. And then we have our bonus breakout, and that's optional if you can hang around at noon for an extra 15 minutes. Sometimes we like to have some informal conversation or just keep the conversation going in overtime if we need to. As always, don't stress about taking notes. The slides and recording are going to be distributed after today's meeting, after we wrap up. Okay, so let's dive in first. Wonderful to see everybody introducing yourself. So as always, this is our opportunity roundtable. This is our floodgate. It's a hyperlink cheat sheet, and so you'll get this and you can dive in on these programs further. I'm going to highlight the blue programs today and updates. And you're going to start seeing these chats start popping up in the links pop up in the chat as well. And so, one of the things that some of you may have heard from, and actually we got to get a little update from our policy director, is about the May revise. So that's on the left. So the state's May revise for the 2024-25 budget came out, and you all know by now that the state's budget here in California is not the best news this year. Deficits are actually worse than they were originally projected in January by about $7 billion. So it does seem like the governor was able to preserve a lot of the transit and climate programs, and that some funds were going to be shifted from the general fund or from the general fund to the greenhouse gas reduction fund. And so we're not seeing as many hits as maybe were originally proposed. However, active transportation programs are going to be substantially cut, and that's actually one of the programs that we're going to be talking about today. And then, our friends at the feds are going to be helping us out as well. The state will receive an additional $15.9 million from the feds to enhance their climate budget. And speaking of feds, I wanted to mention just one thing that's outside of our normal grant world, and invite anybody over the chat to tell me a little bit about if they've experienced it. But I just learned of something called community project funding that is available through your local congressional office. So, I was looking at a House member's website and talking to some partners, and you can actually submit formal funding requests for them to submit on your behalf to appropriations on an annual basis. Is anybody doing that here in our Learn network? I'd be so interested if you've had experience doing that. The district I looked at was funding like 15 projects a year in their community. And it ranges on a lot of different things, community development and all sorts of things, but climate could probably and energy could probably benefit from learning more about that model. I would like to bring somebody here to speak about it so we all learn a little bit more about how to take advantage of that opportunity. Okay, so as you see here, there's so many opportunities coming down from DOE, right? So thank goodness, as California's budget is not having its best year, we still have things coming down from folks like the DOE. I'm going to let the DOE share with you a lot of the updates on things that are highlighted in yellow, like the C-Site grant that's coming up at the end of the month, it's coming due. I also wanted to just flag here, just so folks know that the EECBG formula grant, that deadline got extended to October 31st. So if that was something that you were working on, but then thought that it was going to end in April, if you have longer to go ahead and take advantage of the, or redeem basically the amount that you had formula granted to you. Okay, so I wanted to talk about just a couple of programs here in blue. So one is the California Transportation Commission's Active Transportation Program. We just kind of talked about it a little bit. It's due on June 17th. So this, this program may be cut in the future, but it is available to local governments, public agencies, state agencies, and tribal government. Its purpose is to encourage increased use of active modes of transportation by achieving goals like increase in the proportion of trips accomplished by biking and walking, safety and mobility, and efforts to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals, enhance public health, and ensure that disadvantaged communities can benefit. So that's a program that's available till June 17th. I wanted to make sure that that was on your radar, or if you're not the transportation person, maybe you send it along to whoever is. Maybe they're in your public works office or a regional agency. Okay, the other one I wanted to talk about was the CPUC's Equity Engagement and Education Grant. This is the second cycle of this funding. So if you're like, I thought it already happened, it did. This second cycle is available until June 30th. And so it will grant awards up to $200,000 for the purpose of building CBO, tribal, and community capacity to understand and engage with CPU decision-making processes. The application is not too horrible. And so you have, in this case, until June 30th to apply. The other couple of things I just wanted to mention down below are input opportunities. The California Air Resources Board has their California Climate Investment Triennial Investment Plan. So we're just talking about, this is the cap and trade auction revenues that go into the CCI program. There's been over $20 billion spent out of this program to date on all sorts of 80 different programs and 24 different agencies around the state. This is a really massive climate investment. And you have an opportunity to help shape it and inform it. And there's different ways to do that. I've asked them to actually come to one of these. We'll see if we can get them here so that you can kind of easily share your input. And I'll share with you, some of you guys know I have my Better Funding report that's kind of in draft form and almost done. I submitted that to them because it's one way that I've already compiled a lot of your input and can share the kinds of things, the kinds of ways you all would like to see funding deployed. The last one here is OPR and is working with the California Natural Resources Agency on, whoops, a typo, but updated climate, statewide climate adaptation strategy. And so they are going to be doing workshops in June around the state. So you're going to start hearing about those workshops, and I'm working with them a little bit and trying to see if we can actually maybe even bring them to the SLEEK meeting that we're going to have in person before the forum on June 25th. So more to come on that. But if you're in a position where you'd like to work with these guys to identify regional workshop opportunities, then contact me. I can put you in touch. Okay, so if you are interested in sharing other opportunities that you're aware of around the state, so it could come from your organization, maybe you're doing an event or a training, like 3C Ren has one here on a HERS raters. Share that in the chat so we all benefit from knowing about what's going on around the state. All right, so thanks. And with that, I think we're going to move right into our featured discussion. Somebody in this network had asked to have DOE come, and I thought, yes, let's do it. It's been a little while since we had the DOE come and speak, and so thank you for that suggestion. So I'm going to start by handing it off to Lisa Hu, and a lot of you know Lisa. She's a program lead for the US DOE and the Office of State and Community Energy Programs. She previously led key programs at the California Strategic Growth Council here in California, along with OPR. And before that, she was at the Greenlining Institute where she was doing research and advocacy and coalition building, supporting under-resourced and environmental justice communities. And I just think she's fantastic. So I'm glad that she's here, and she's joined also by Sika at NREL, who she's going to introduce once she's done with her presentation. But basically, we're going to get an overview of a lot of different DOE programs today, things that are active and coming. And then we're going to have a chance to talk about, to give some input on future DOE technical assistance programs. But for now, you're going to get 2 presentations. While you're listening, go ahead and throw your questions in the chat for Lisa and Sika. All right, go ahead, take it away, Lisa. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thanks so much for the warm introduction, Angie. Very generous. And thanks everyone for inviting me. It's great to be back in Learn meetings, this time wearing a new hat, as Angie said. So I'm Lisa Hu, I use she, her pronouns. I'm an analyst and program lead at DOE in the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, also called SCEP. I'm placed on the Community Innovation and Technical Assistance team. I'm joined by Christine Knapp, who's the program manager for that team. And I'm based on Ohlone land, also called Oakland, California. And I'm thrilled today to share about some DOE funding opportunities and resources specifically for local governments. I will note that in the interest of time, I will skip some slides, but I've kept them in the deck so that they can be a reference for all of you, and we will have some time for clarifying questions and discussion. Next slide, please. Great. So as folks may know, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, investments led to some reorganization at DOE, including the formation of this office, the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, or SCEP. The mission is shared on this slide, and frankly marks a different way for DOE to engage directly with and grant directly to stakeholders that may be new to DOE. We do this through the management and oversight of over $16 billion in formula funding, competitive grants, consumer rebates, and lots of technical assistance, which we're eager to discuss later on. Next slide, please. And all told, SCEP as an office houses over 28 programs, some of which are named here and hopefully sound familiar. Next slide, please. So for this audience, I'm going to focus on 3 formula opportunities and 2 competitive opportunities. And as Angie said, those formula opportunities, right, are non-competitive. The allocation is already predetermined. Next slide. So the 3 formula opportunities I'll highlight for you today. The first one is Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, or EECBG. It's a $550 million program funding states, local governments, and tribes to implement strategies that reduce energy use, reduce fossil fuel emissions, and improve energy efficiency. As Angie mentioned, the deadlines for both local governments and tribes were just extended. So local governments now have until end of October 2024. Tribes have until May of 2025. The next program that I'll talk about in an upcoming slide is the latest in Zero Building Energy Code adoption. That is $1 billion in grants to support states and local jurisdictions to adopt, implement, and enforce latest model zero energy codes or equivalent standards. And then finally, the Home Energy Rebates Program is an almost $8.8 billion program in total, covering both whole home retrofits and specific appliances. So that one, states, tribes, and territories will apply. And I'll just note that for California, led by the CEC, California has already submitted their application earlier this year in January. So more information is available on the CEC website. Next slide, please. Great. So the first, EECBG, as I mentioned, this program offers flexible formula funds spanning 14 eligible use areas, including some of the ones here. And I will note that one thing we really like about this program is if navigating the grant process feels too cumbersome, we do recommend that local governments consider the voucher option to receive their funding allocation in equipment rebates and or technical assistance. This option offers a simpler application and shortened reporting requirements. EECBG as a program also offers technical assistance, including the blueprints, community energy fellows, and some one-on-one application support through NREL. Next slide, please. The second formula program I mentioned is the Building Energy Codes, which is described here. Next slide, please. These grants fund states and local governments with code-making authority to adopt latest model building energy codes or their equivalent and adopt zero energy codes or the equivalent. So there's a lot more detail on that program on this slide. Next slide, please. Great. Here's a quick snapshot of the eligibility information on the codes program. Next slide, please. And this is what their FOA overview looks like. And again, all of these slides are already provided. They will be coming your way. They will be posted. I can answer a couple questions, but I don't work on this program, so I can refer you to the staff who do. Next slide, please. Third formula program I'm highlighting today is the home energy rebates, which includes two different sections. So there's a $4.3 billion part for home efficiency rebates, or homes, as you're seeing on the left, and $4.5 billion for home electrification and appliance rebates, also called HERE. Next slide, please. So this slide offers some further detail on both of those different home energy rebates programs. Next slide, please. And this is a quick snapshot of the potentially eligible equipment, technologies, and housing types of the home energy rebates program. I do want to note that ultimately the program administrator will ultimately decide if they want to focus on specific technologies or equipment to stretch dollars, things like that. So for California folks, you'll really look at what the CEC has put in place. Next slide, please. All right, I know I'm going fast. It's to make sure we have time to get here. Wanted to highlight this competitive grant program funded by SCEP's newest annual program. Next slide, please. And this is funded by the Local Government Energy Program, which right now has a live funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, out right now. The FOA is called Communities Sparking Investment in Transformative Energy, or CSITE. And for this FOA, we have $18 million available to fund implementation of clean energy projects and programs. Those applications are due Friday, May 31st of this year, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Next slide, please. So at a glance, these are the four main goals of the program. One is to deliver those local community benefits. Two, we want to spark additional investments in communities that can ideally create long-term local economic development and support community revitalization. Three, we want to see projects that advance community identified energy priorities and right to self-determination. And finally, to build local capacity and partnerships in local governments and tribes, which we know is so essential. Next slide, please. So per Congress, eligible primes are federally recognized Indian tribes and local governments representing the following: disadvantaged communities or energy transition communities or small to medium-sized jurisdictions. And here that definition means communities under 250,000 people. So with this initial $18 million, we intend to award up to 20 communities, each ranging from $900K to $3.6 million per award. Awarded communities will also receive customized technical assistance, access to peer exchanges, the option for on-site capacity through a community energy fellow for up to 18 months to support local program implementation. Next slide, please. So as this is the first FOA for a brand new annual program, we opted to keep the parameters quite broad in terms of technologies and project types. And so you'll see, a non-exhaustive list on this slide. So projects may include, but are not limited to, things like building electrification, electric transportation, microgrids, renewables, resilience hubs, workforce development. It's meant to be a very broad net. And these project ideas may already exist in places like tribal strategic plans, local government climate action plans, regional electrification plans, utility community benefit plans. There's a pretty long list that we've included in the FOA. So again, at a high level, we're really looking for projects that, do come with some pre-existing community and decision maker buy-in, the benefits flowing to disadvantaged communities, meaningful community engagement, building on existing community assets, and creating economic and community revitalization opportunities. Next slide, please. Possible project examples may include, but again, are not limited to the following. We've just offered some ideas to hopefully spark other ideas for you and your communities. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this one and I'm going to skip over the next one too. But again, all of this is included in the deck. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So for this FOA, this is how we've defined local governments. It is also, again, a non-exhaustive list. I'll note that we as DOE cannot confirm specific applicant eligibility to avoid perception of providing an unfair competitive advantage. And we also cannot account for all different quasi-government entities. So if you are unclear, even looking at this list, we recommend 1, reviewing the FOA itself, and 2, looking at our Q&A document, which is publicly posted and regularly updated. If you're still unsure if your entity is eligible, please consider partnering with an entity that you know is eligible for this proposal, because that deadline is right around the corner. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to dive into the eligibility map here for time, but I will note if your community does not appear on the eligibility map provided or is not accurately categorized in your view, please just state in your application how and why you think your community should be eligible, given the definitions that we've provided in the FOA. I'll skip the next slide, please, and we'll go to the next one. Great, so this is a reminder of the technical assistance, and next slide, please. Great. So hopefully based on that primer, you've decided to apply for a C-Site grant. We recommend looking at the program webpage, which includes a lot of informational webinars, a brand new how to apply webinar, including a detailed talk through of application review criteria, materials, templates, things like that. Please do look at Infrastructure Exchange. That's the portal which houses the FOA, the Q&A document, the templates. That's also where you will submit completed applications. If you're still a little, on the fence, please look at the executive summary, which is a 2-page front portion of the FOA. And again, those applications are due on Friday, May 31st. Okay, I'm going to go super fast. I know I'm running a little long. Next slide, please. Great. So as I wrap up here, I want to note that while much of the focus has been on those bill and IRA funds, which are exciting, but one-time funds, once those funds are exhausted, they're exhausted. So we wanted to therefore spotlight SCEP's 2 annual programs, which will continue after the bill and IRA programs are complete. So the first that we just talked about in some length was the Local Government Energy Program. SCEP's other annual program is the Energy Future Grants Program. Their first FOA has closed and already announced their first FOA partner teams, but please keep an eye out for future opportunities from that program. And I'll note here that, DOE is unfortunately unable to provide advance notice of when future funding will open to avoid perception of providing an unfair competitive advantage. So what I'm doing here is trying to flag some annual programs to keep an eye out for, programs that we know still have funds. And signing up for those newsletters is a great way to make sure you're in the first batch when funding is available. Next slide, please. Great. I'll do a quick touch here, calling out another program of interest from our sister office, DOE's Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, or OSED. OSED's Energy Improvements in Rural and Remote Areas, or ERA program, has $1 billion total specifically for rural and remote communities. That program has already released funds through a grant, a FOA, and a prize. But again, please keep an eye out for future funding opportunities from this program. The next slide has their contact information. And just to close, next slide, please. Yes, and we'll keep going. Great, so snapshot of some existing tools and information that's publicly available on our website that may support you in your existing work. And then last slide. Great, and many of those resources are found via our State and Local Solutions Center or through our monthly State and Local Spotlight newsletter. We also invite you to connect with DOE's brand new Office of Community Engagement, or OCE, which is the front door for communities into all of DOE. Those outreach specialists are great folks to help guide you through the various DOE offices and opportunities, in addition to program staff like myself. So thank you. I know I went a little long, but hopefully that was helpful. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to my colleague, Sika. Sika is an energy, technology, and policy researcher and program manager at the Accelerated Deployment and Decision Support Center at NREL, also called the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And Sika leads the Clean Energy to Communities C2C Expert Match Technical Assistance Program. So I'll hand it over to Sika.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So kind of continuing on Lisa's presentation, I'm going to specifically speak to one technical assistance program, the Clean Energy to Communities program that launched last year and provides multiple points of entry for receiving technical assistance at the local level. Next slide. Thank you. So C2C, Clean Energy to Communities, provides support to communities on a broad set of topics in a variety of sectors. So the overarching goal of the program is to provide innovative, cross-cutting technical solutions to municipalities, tribes, utilities, community-based organizations, nonprofits across the US to help them identify and implement solutions across the clean power space, mobility, buildings, and the grid. So kind of based on this really broad goal, we did go about kind of doing really in-depth stakeholder and community engagement over 2 years to really understand how the program could support communities at the local level, really getting to what types of assistance would be most beneficial from the labs. Next slide, please. So with that, we've designed a program C2C that has 3 points of entry, the 3 offerings under this program. And there's the in-depth partnerships, peer learning cohorts, and expert match. I will speak to all 3 broadly, but go into a bit more depth related to expert match. So in-depth partnerships are multi-year engagements where national labs work with a local project team that includes a local government, a utility partner, and a community-based organization. And we work with a handful of communities. In the first cohort, there are about 4 to 6 communities over 3 years, and really work on a cross-sectoral technical question. Peer learning cohorts are mid-level commitments. So here over 6 months, over 6 months, communities receive assistance in a peer learning format. And we support about 15 communities across each cohort topic. And usually about 3 cohorts launch every 6 months. And so in the upcoming cohorts, there will be a focus on mobility, kind of thinking about fleet transition at the local level, a cohort topic on agrivoltaics, and then another on kind of building decarbonization. And these topics are based on input from communities kind of on an ongoing basis. And then the lightest touch offering under C2C is the Expert Match program. This is a short-term technical assistance, usually provided over 3 months, where communities receive up to 60 hours of one-on-one technical assistance on a range of technical topics. So on the next slide, I'm going to dive into a bit more detail about in-depth, and then cohorts, and then Expert Match. So on the next slide, in terms of in-depth partnerships, this is the longest form or longest offering under the C2C program. And there is the requirement that we have 3 partners on the team. So the local government, like I mentioned, the utility, and a community-based organization. So for this current cycle of in-depth partnerships, applications are currently open. We released an RFP on April 1st, and applications will be open through June 14th. And here, it is the most competitive part of the program. And so the teams have to come together and really put together an application that reflects some cross-sectoral technical question that you have. If you visit the C2C in-depth website, you get a sense of example requests from the communities in the current cohort, in case you're interested and have questions about kind of the kinds of questions we're supporting under this offering. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of high level timeline related to in-depth. The pre-solicitation opened in March, and then the RFP opened, like I mentioned, in April, and the deadline is June 14th. The partnerships run for about 3 years, and you can scan the QR code for more information. There's actually an in-depth partnerships webinar happening right now. And so our website also has recordings from those webinars, and they answer some questions you might have about eligibility and just any other kind of questions related to this funding opportunity. Next slide, please. So moving to peer learning cohorts, like I mentioned, they're launched every 6 months, and they're usually 3 new cohort topics, and they are pre-selected clean energy topics. And usually the applications open about 6 weeks to 3 months before they launch. And with the just closed one, I mentioned the 3 topics that are highlighted on the slide here. And in terms of application eligibility, this is usually kind of targeted towards local governments, tribal partners, utility and community-based organizations. You can apply to multiple cohorts at the same time. We do have some communities participating in multiple at a time, and you can apply to as many cohorts as possible. So it's not just a one-off opportunity as well. And once we receive applications, we review the applications and select between 8 to 15 communities to participate in each cohort. And the cohorts convene monthly for 2 hours over those 6 months. So the time commitment is really just the actual call time on a monthly basis, so about 2 hours. And there's usually a bit of assignment homework ahead and ahead of those calls and after those calls, just to make sure that communities are moving along kind of a peer learning process. Next slide, please. So kind of now I'll spend the next few slides diving specifically into Expert Match. So Expert Match is a third offering in C2C. It is a short-term technical assistance offering. And this offering specifically came out of requests we're getting from communities that might have near-term questions. They need to make a decision and want that light touch technical assistance to help inform whatever decisions they have to make. And this offering is meant to be kind of intentionally flexible to reflect just the range of entities that are embarking on various clean energy efforts. So in terms of eligibility here, in addition to local governments, tribal partners, utilities, and so on, CBOs and nonprofits are also eligible, and we have seen quite a large share of CBOs and nonprofits requesting assistance through Expert Match. And the program, kind of C2C overall, kind of covers a broad range of technical topics, but just a few that I want to highlight is we're seeing requests kind of focused on specific clean energy technologies or buildings, mobility, and the grid, and then energy and environmental justice as well. And we often have requests that might cut across multiple areas. So we might have a request that at its core is an energy and environmental justice request, but is maybe specific to buildings, specific to the grid, specific to mobility. So what we do is, as the labs is overseeing this program, is once a community submits a request, we go find the right expert based on the request you've submitted, and they provide that one-on-one technical support over 3 months. I also just want to highlight here that the program launched last year, and at this point we're working with or have closed out over 100 requests in the first year and have had a few from California. So we've worked with the city of Santa Cruz and a few community-based organizations in Fresno and Stockton. So again, and all of those requests have been quite different. So if you have any questions about, any questions you have about does my question fit in the Expert Match, happy to answer that during the Q&A session. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just provide a bit more detail on what an actual request can look like. So this is one case study focused on work we did with Washtenaw County in Michigan. So we worked with Washtenaw County, the local government partner there, and they're very early in their fleet electrification efforts. And they really wanted assistance on 2 things. So the first was kind of thinking about the municipal fleet transition process. So what we did, experts at the Argonne National Lab, was analyze the economic and emissions reduction options from transitioning the county's municipal fleet, which is a mix of light and medium duty vehicles. And we paired this assistance with assistance from the local Clean Cities Coalition partner to provide some guidance on funding pathways to support those fleet transition efforts. So the unique thing with transportation related requests is that we have additional funding from the Vehicles Technologies Office to partner with local clean cities coalitions. So in addition to the one-on-one technical support communities receive from labs, you also get the additional local clean cities support where helpful. And we found that to be really important because it provides helpful local context to mobility and transportation related requests that we're seeing through the program. Next slide, please. I think I had one more slide, but that slide just talked through some example requested questions, but I'm happy to kind of answer any questions that relate to, again, is my question a good fit for Expert Match or the other offerings under the program?
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Sika. Those packed a punch. And I'm guessing after all the stuff we've just presented to you all that your heads might be swimming just a little bit. But I do want to take a moment to take some questions. I have some questions for these guys. I can always get us warmed up. But first, I actually thought, since we have Miriam here, if you're still listening in, Miriam from CEC, I wanted to just ask you to lift up your comment from the chat in terms of what's happening here in California on the Homes and Here program.
Hi, Angie, can you hear me?
It can, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And I have my HERA expert colleague on the line too. Carol Schmidt is here, who can speak to HERA even better. Yeah, so thank you so much, Lisa, for that presentation. I felt like she was giving us a little more credit than is perhaps quite yet due. We have submitted the first part of the HERA application that was submitted in January, and we're eagerly awaiting DOE's approval of that application so we can move to the next stage. On the homes front, we are working on the application now and we'll be submitting it soon, hopefully. We are working now, and we are working to, as we've mentioned in a workshop and in several forums, and I know folks here have been participating in things going on with the equitable building decarbonization solicitation, which is now live. We're proposing to DOE that we'll allocate 60% of our homes funding to that EBD direct install program, and then the other 40% will be part of a pay for performance pathway for homes. So that's in the works, and thank you to anyone on this call who's participated in our workshop and public comments in the last couple of months.
And thank you, Miriam, for being so engaged. In fact, we have our regular meeting that we have every other month at the CEC with a small group of folks that are residential energy experts at the local level. And if you're one of them and would like to join us, contact me and I will get you in on that meeting. Our next one's next week. Okay, so I see one question here in the chat from Erica. So hello, Sika. Solano County is developing a land use ordinance for battery energy storage systems. Are there technical assistance resources we can access regarding the economics of domestic manufacturing, content requirements, and interconnection fees based on location?
Good question. Looking at the question, I think there are elements that can be answered through expert match, whether that's experts from, I think I didn't mention this in the overview, but expert match staffs experts from 5 national labs. So NREL, Argonne National Lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and PNNL. And so across the group, usually we're able to find an expert to answer your question. When it comes to domestic manufacturing or content requirements, we can provide some guidance and considerations, but we don't provide kind of legal or tax advice when it comes to IRA eligibility. So if this question kind of partly relates to that, we will not be able to provide assistance for that specific part of your question. But other than that, I think that this is a request that we could definitely support on the expert match.
She says, thank you. So you must have answered it well. I do want to mention that, we have a TA directory as part of our resource library, and I'm going to be sure to try to help you navigate to the right place when you need it. And so that new community engagement office that Lisa mentioned is something that will add to that. And even this expert match, I invite you to go and navigate yourself directly to these programs. But I think sometimes those technical assistance questions come to me, and now I know I can go to you guys and maybe help submit those over there if they're very technical. So if I can be helpful, I certainly would like to be. Other questions, feel free also to raise your hand, folks, but while you're thinking, I just want to say one thing, which is SCEP and DOE in general is doing some really innovative stuff with funding deployment. And I want to say thank you for folks like Lisa and Sika doing just creating, being thoughtful about how to not only use the dollars, but access them. And I thought I'd just ask, what are you all learning is kind of on the forefront of figuring out how to get the right dollars to the right places and deploying these programs for communities? What are you learning about what's working?
Jump in, maybe give Sika a moment. I know she was just presenting. So I will say that on the SCEP side, the funds that we have are largely new funds. So in terms of implementation stories, I don't think we're pulling from as deep of a reservoir as some of our other offices. That being said, I think big picture, there are things that will sound familiar, hopefully, to this audience. Definitely things like, simpler applications, simpler reporting requirements, mechanisms like prizes to reduce barriers, offering technical assistance along with funds, providing access to experts and tools and networks. There's been some, mixed feedback on like our pre-proposal steps, like concept papers useful? Do they help, set projects up for success? The other part I'll lift up really quickly is, the importance of strategic partnerships and trusted messengers. So we really want to make sure as more and more opportunities from DOE, specifically from SCEP as a new office, come out, there are new kinds of eligible entities. There are new kinds of, partners that we are trying to reach with these dollars. And so really encouraging, everyone on this call and many others to also like assist us in that process, to make sure that we're sharing opportunities widely, that we're tailoring them from specific opportunities, specific communities that may be eligible, but maybe newer to DOE processes. Yeah, Sika, I don't know if you have more specific thoughts you wanted to add there.
Yeah, so from the expert match perspective, we definitely kind of have tried to make the application form as simple as possible, because that was also something we heard quite a bit. And in terms of what have worked, we also see expert match as kind of one of many steps that communities will have to take to ultimately get to their implementation goals. And so viewing expert match assistance, especially if the deliverable is like modeling and analysis or analysis focused, that it can be used in future funding efforts. So we have a lot of communities we're working with who are applying to various funding opportunities. And maybe if they're thinking of solar plus storage sizing, for example, don't even kind of know where to start. That analysis really helps them, one, get a sense of kind of the emission savings, but also just the costs, estimates in terms of capital costs. And those are numbers they can use in funding opportunities. So as a program, we can't provide grant writing support, but we found that analysis support to be very helpful. And one other thing I'll mention is also just really being flexible, given the kind of range of communities that we're working with, like entities, different applicants. It just looks different depending on whether you're working with a local government team that has 3 or 4 people on that team, or one person, or a community-based organization, or a tribal partner. We've tried to be as flexible as possible, and just, acknowledging that things, some things delay, take longer than expected, and then ultimately just staying focused on trying to provide the most helpful assistance as possible.
Thank you both. That analysis helps with project scoping, and then there's a fine line between that and a grant application. So it's getting a lot of the way there without being called grant application, and really useful for a lot of folks, because that's what I hear all the time, that project scoping is a humongous barrier. All right, one more question from me, and then I see one more in the chat. Feel free to add more, guys, but what, we've been at the IRA funding and IIJA funding for a little bit now. We're seeing a lot of funds drop out of the federal government right now, but perhaps we are on the back end of a curve of the windfall, at least the current couple of windfalls. And folks, I think, are trying to understand what the outlook looks like. Not that we can have a crystal ball and understand what's going to happen in the election, but what is the outlook in the future for DOE funding and technical assistance in the next couple of years? And what can local governments and their partners expect and ideally begin preparing for?
Yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, right, Angie? So what I can offer, because this is definitely a fine line, ultimately Congress makes determinations, right, in terms of our budgets. What I did try to do here, that I hope is useful for folks, is highlight the annual programs. So the 2 of the annual programs from our office in particular are the Local Government Energy Program and the Energy Future Grants programs. Those are not Bill and IRA. Those are not going away, we hope. They are new programs, but we do want to really lift those up, because those will be, in theory, places where folks can come back to over and over again. There may be some changes, I think, between the different, funding opportunities, maybe like different topic areas or, design choices. But in terms of like funding streams, the goal with those annual programs is to be that reliable place. And for the local government energy program in particular, we're really trying to design this program to be a reliable, permanent home for communities and local governments and tribes that are seeking that kind of implementation funding for clean energy projects. So as I mentioned before, like we can't unfortunately give specific advance notice. We have some pretty strict guardrails in terms of, avoiding any perception of an unfair competitive advantage. So I know that makes forecasting extra difficult. But the other part that I will mention is, in addition to that ERA program, that rural and remote program, in terms of, how can local governments and partners begin preparing? I do think looking at, looking at the applications for those annual programs that I mentioned might be a good way to get started and just get a sense of, even if things change in the next round, what were those teams looking for in the first run? That might be a great way to help you prepare, get familiar with some of the, federal templates and things like that. Another thing that's worth considering is those Justice 40 values, right? And those components, those are likely going to help you as well. Things that like, community engagement, community benefits, thinking about partnerships, thinking about stakeholder and labor engagement, DEIA, building, regional partnerships, thinking about maybe unexpected or new kinds of partnerships. Like those might be some good approaches as you're building kind of local capacity and preparing yourselves for funding opportunities as they open. So those would be some.
I mean, I'm excited about the local government energy program, and Seaside is, I agree. Let's all take a look at Seaside, and it's nice to know something's gonna stick around. I do want to tackle one last question here in the chat before we move into our discussion on TA, which is from SP, and she's asking, when you talk about energy company as a partner, can it be any energy company or only IOUs? And I imagine that's for Sika.
Thanks, SP. Yeah, and I'll put the response in the chat as well, but I'm assuming this is for the in-depth technical partnerships, and there is a broad range of what qualifies as an electric utility there. So municipal utilities, co-ops, community choice aggregators, in addition to kind of your IOUs would be an eligible partner. But if you have kind of specific questions, if you send that question to the C2C email, c2c@nrel.gov, we will kind of let you know more specifically, but I'll put my response in the chat as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And so we're going to move into our next slide, where we want to have a little discussion specifically about future technical assistance. So I'll hand it back over to Lisa to kind of set up a discussion.
So I know between Sika and I, we covered a lot of ground, and apologies, but again, those decks are meant to be there as resources. But we did really want to kind of open up a discussion in this space in particular about technical assistance programs. Definitely heard about the C2C model that Sika has discussed. And I will share that on the SCEP side, we are also actively designing future technical assistance programs. So I think we'd like to, hear from all of you a bit more about your experiences, about your ideas. We'd love to hear anything you're willing to share about, accessible, meaningful, effective TA, things that are working, things that are not working. I also have some, follow-up nerdy questions in terms of even things like logistics, like what is helpful? Is a teaming approach helpful? Is a virtual TA at all helpful? Are technology specific access to TA helpful? Where in the process is TA most helpful, right? Like Angie mentioned, kind of the project scoping phase as a component. And a lot of that thinking through phases is, I think, why C2C landed on that model, but just wanted to open up some space to, hear from folks here based on all of your work. Yeah, reactions, recommendations for us here on accessible, meaningful, and effective TA. Yeah, Sika, anything you want to add there?
One thing maybe I'll add there is that is also something that we continue to reflect on from the NREL perspective. NREL supports and leads several technical assistance programs. So to the extent that we can get a sense of what's working and not working, we can definitely pass that along as we're actively kind of designing these programs. And then specifically from the expert match perspective as well, we have refined the program over time based on what we've heard is working and not working. So in as much as the core program is set in stone, any opportunities for some improvement would definitely be any of your your feedback on that and ideas there would be great.
So I want to invite folks, you put it in the chat, but this would be a good time to raise your hand and share your thoughts. I have sent along the Better Funding report that you guys sort of heard me talk about to these guys too, which is still being finalized. It talks a lot about what we've been talking about when it comes to TA. I can share a little bit of that here if folks need to be warmed up, but I do want to give folks a chance to tell you, what have you experienced? Have you had a great TA experience? Have you had a bad TA experience? Are you just not feeling like it's easy enough to even take advantage of it? Tell us. I'll share some themes that I've heard if people are still thinking that I think folks like to have a place to ask questions to, and it's fine if that is remote, and it's great if it's niche and expert. People don't want to go hunting to 100 different doors. They want to have one door to start with and be directed, I think, to an expert that can ask a question. But that's like a really short-term TA need. I feel like there's buckets of TA. There's like a quick question, and then there's like we need to start from scratch to build capacity to do anything. And in that case, what I'm hearing from communities, both local and tribal, often is that we don't necessarily want that to be unfamiliar, remote, duplicative, or even necessarily housed within an agency in one agency in isolation of all of these other opportunities too. What might be a more ideal approach, and what we talk about in the Better Funding report, is having an administrative apparatus here within California that lasts, that is regional based, where we actually can pipe dollars in to regions where we can elevate and empower the expertise that already exists on the ground and let that be lasting. And so some of what we see in TA is even like a 3-month fellow. I like to see what SCEP is doing with like an 18-month fellow, super good, because what communities are saying is it takes time to educate a TA provider and make them familiar enough with what's going on to be useful. And sometimes it's not useful to have somebody come out from nowhere. So longer term and proximity matters and trust matters. And so what we're trying to think into and try to find a pathway for is to set up a more regional system for lasting TA that could actually do the kinds of project scoping that would then funnel its way into direct funding opportunities. So that I want to hear from folks. Maybe that jogged some thoughts. I see thumbs happening in the chat, but people are being shy today. Or maybe it could be just a discussion. Lisa, I don't know if that makes any sense with you or if that's what you're hearing as well.
Yeah, I think the bucketing that you mentioned, Angie, is definitely something that's come up a lot. We're looking at many models here at the federal level, and many of those models also, we've kind of tested in California, right? But C2C is a great way that, right, we're kind of like trying to meet those different kinds of needs for folks. Another program I'll just throw out in the chat in case it's interesting to folks is the Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project. So they're mostly focused on like remote island communities. So I think part of that is also, right, like getting more specific about which kinds of communities are we trying to serve? Where are they in the process? What does local capacity look like? How do we offer, as Sika said, something as flexible as possible that is also ultimately allowing that specific community to move in the direction that they want. I think that that's kind of the what we are trying to figure out how to make happen on the kind of program design and admin side, candidly, and figuring that out is definitely a process. But yeah, any thoughts folks have, and like Angie said, even bad experiences, unfortunately, can be really helpful for us to hear about. Was there a dynamic around local trust that didn't work? Were there some basic parts on, cultural competency maybe that were missed? Or, were there, did you need kind of a 101 level before a matching process, or there was staff turnover? And so there were challenges on even having the capacity to take advantage of capacity building opportunities. Very, very open ears to some of those dynamics that, I've definitely heard on the California front and now at the federal level.
Well, what you're saying really resonates with us as well. So we would love to continue to have this bridge with you all. I think between this network and SCEP and other parts of DOE, as you guys are thinking into this more, if you want to bring a topic back, if you have sort of a concept that you want to bring back, and we can do a full listening session on it and facilitate it, we'd be very happy to do that. And that better funding report has some of what you're asking for. And I invite all folks here, if there's something in there that you would like to add to please do, because I haven't finalized it yet. Okay, and see some thumbs up for regional collaboratives here in the chat. And thank you for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and scroll on. We're almost done here. I take the opportunity here to say a big thank you to Lisa and Sika for joining us today. That was so informative. You will get all of the slides, like we said, and a resource sort of cheat sheet after this meeting. And we'll do some work on our end to try to embed some of these resources into our website as well. And if you're ever confused, Lisa gave you her email address. If you just need like, hey, how do I do this? How do I take advantage of this? And of course, I'm around as well. So keep scrolling along. This is really just a couple slides I'm going to hand over to DOE just to summarize what's in better funding and including some of our pilot ideas. Okay, next one, please. All right, so the last thing I want to talk to you about at our formal 1 hour before we go into overtime is just to say we are not doing a Learn next month. We have been, the last couple of years, we've taken June off, or the month of the SEEK Forum. So June is the SEEK Forum. We hope you all are registered already, or if you haven't yet, please do. It's in Palm Springs. It's going to be on June 25th and 26th. And we think we're going to get hundreds of people. We got more, session proposals than ever, and our program is out now, so you can take a look. If you are coming, I want to encourage the folks that are local government representatives to also check your inbox, because you got an invitation to register for the State and Local Energy and Climate Coordination meeting. We had our first one last year, pre-forum at SEEK in person. We're doing the same thing this year. So it's going to be 9 to 11, the morning before the SEEK Forum begins, on site. And so we're thinking through topics of conversation. And so what we normally do at the SLEEK meetings is we bring state agencies and local government representatives together. We're attempting to build a better, hub for communication and ideation, so we can really try to tackle some of these systems level barriers and co-create some solutions that are really operational. And so at this meeting, I think we're going to spend a little time in an activity where we're going to try to get a little clearer on local roles, so that state agencies can potentially get a little clearer about what we do and how that's changing and what the needs are. I think we're also toying around with a conversation directly on direct pay tax credits and possibilities for bridge funding. And then OPR and CNRA are actually interested, like I mentioned earlier, doing listening sessions on their adaptation strategy. And so that's an option too. We might do a little listening session with them. And so if you have other thoughts on topics that you want to see SLEEK cover, we meet quarterly. I would really welcome you to always send those to me. If you're like, hey, there's a statewide issue that we really need some state attention on, or there's a statewide policy or program that I really we would like to kind of get in cahoots about, contact me and we'll put it on our list of topics. Okay, so with that, I want to close us out of our official meeting. So next slide, please. And thank our speakers once again. If they can hang around, they're welcome to do it, and we'll have more conversation and overtime. But this is now the beginning of our optional bonus breakout, and it's a space for informal discussion among the Learn Network, and you can offer any kind of announcement, success story, or opportunity. If you have a need for information, or say you heard 1,000 things today that you want to take advantage of and you want to look for partners and collaborators, that's one way to sit around and talk about that and see if anybody is also looking. Or if you advice, you have a TA request, all sorts of things, or you just want to suggest a topic for a future Learn. So let's go into that phase basically now. And anybody who had to go at noon, have a great day. All right, so I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let anything rise to the surface that folks might have in mind. And it could be even an extension of the conversation we were just having on DOE programs or TA.